About a month before I was ordained a priest 50 years ago, I had the occasion to sit down with one of our senior priests of that day, Monsignor John Vogel. And Father Vogel was one of the giants of the diocese. Many of the other priests simply called him Doc Vogel. He had a couple of doctorates in theology. He taught at Maryman's College, among other things. But just he and I were talking for about an hour. And I knew his 50th anniversary was coming up. And I looked at him, and I thought, I didn't know you could still be a priest when you're that old. I have a little bit different perspective right now. But I do remember in the conversation that he was talking about some of the unusual ministries he had. And because he taught college during the school year, he had some free time during the summer. And one of the things he did was he became a street preacher. He went to some of the towns and villages within our own diocese, Northwest Ohio, where there were no Catholic churches, and perhaps not many Catholics at all. And he did this for several summers, and the way he described it, he had a seminarian assisting him. And they would go into the town a few days early and put signs in the windows that he was going to be there to talk about Catholicism. And they would pass out handbills. And then for 2 or 3 evenings in a row, they would set up a little place, maybe right off the street, maybe a vacant lot or even a parking lot. And they'd put some folding chairs out, and I doubt that he had a PA system, but maybe some sort of podium, or maybe an easel so he could, like a blackboard or something. But he would describe the faith, and people would come, and some of people came to challenge him. Others came just to learn, but he had fun talking about the Catholic faith, why we believe what we believe, and how it makes a difference in our lives. Street preaching. And as he told me this, I was enthralled. He was a great storyteller. I was enthralled by the way he described it. I was intrigued. I was impressed. And I would even say I was inspired, because I was about to be ordained a priest, and I thought, that's great. Let me go out and do some street preaching. So here it is 50 years later, and as I look back at the last 50 years, I can tell you how much street preaching I have done. None. At least not in the literal sense of street preaching. But if we use that as a metaphor of taking our faith into the marketplace, to go outside of the church confines, yes, my priesthood has been filled with a lot of that. In prisons, hospitals, on the border, mission trips, where people gather for recreation, football games, all those many things, the farmer's market. How many times the faith has been shared outside of a church setting, but it's still about the faith. The gospel today is saying that that's what we have to do. Now, if, as Deacon Tom read that gospel, if it sounded familiar, it should have. This is from Matthew's gospel. Just 2 weeks ago, we read the counterpart on the Feast of the Ascension from Mark's gospel, the Great Commission. At the end of his life, just before the Ascension, Jesus appeared to the disciples and said, I send you out to all the nations of the world. And this part from Matthew was chosen probably because of the Feast of the Holy Trinity, because Jesus says, go out, proclaim the gospel, and baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. In other words, baptize them in the God of love. But I send you out to all the corners of the world. In other words, Jesus has told us to do some street preaching. Now, that doesn't mean to be preachy, and that doesn't mean to necessarily go down to Louisiana Avenue and set up your easel. But what it does mean is that we have to embody the faith and share it wherever we go. One of the things that Pope John the 23rd, our patron, said was we need to throw open the windows of the church to let the fresh air of the Holy Spirit come blowing through. That's depicted in the sculpture over here of John opening the windows. But a lot of you may not know, Pope John also said another statement about opening windows. In the Vatican Council, he said, we need to open the windows of the church so that we can see out and others can see in. And in part, that's part of the reason why we chose to build this church with clear glass windows. But it's symbolic of saying that we need to interact with the world. We have to be engaged. We don't hide away from the world, nor we try to suppress the world. We have something to offer. We have to be in dialogue, and dialogue also means listening to what's going on. So Jesus says, go out to all the world, share what you have received. Let it be alive in your hearts and make a difference. And I don't think that's just for priests. I think it's for all the disciples, all of us. You know, it's actually relatively easy to talk about holy things in a holy setting during a holy hour of your life or of the week. It's relatively easy. But we have to do more than that. We have to go out and bring a message of hope. Because there's a lot of hopeless people. There are those who are discouraged and depressed. There are the kids who are bullied. There are those who feel like everybody's against them. The ones who feel left out. The ones overlooked. The ones who are labeled. We have to bring hope. We have to bring light. Because there's a lot of darkness. And a lot of the darkness is hatred. Have you noticed how many people are just plain angry all the time? We have to bring light to overcome the darkness that's there. And we have to be people who represent goodness when there's evil and hatred. It's a real challenge. But that's what the gospel is. And then Jesus says, oh yeah, it's going to be tough, but I'll be with you till the end of the age. I have to tell you, I have found a lot of consolation in that part. Don't worry, I'll be with you. Now, you know how much I like Pope John the 23rd. But I also have to tell you, I like Pope Francis a whole lot as well. And one of the first things that Francis said after he became Pope is that we need not a laboratory faith, but a journey faith. And then he goes on to expound. He says, a laboratory faith is where we're kind of in closed doors. It's controlled. We can become philosophical. We can become very, very much, I think he even uses the word, we can tame the faith. We control it. And he says, that's not what we need right now. We need the faith about journey. And the journey is always where you're moving on. The journey goes to the frontiers. It goes to all the various types of borders of our lives. The journey says, I need to explore. I need to discover. I need to go beyond my own comfort zone. And I need to take risk. That's the street preaching. That's the great commission of the gospel. That is where Jesus is sending us out, to have a faith of journey, not a laboratory faith. I've spent a lot of time the last couple of months looking back at the last 50 years, and two words continue to come up in my mind. One is blessings, and boy, have I been blessed. And the other one is surprises. And many times, the surprises are the blessings, or the blessings are surprising me. I want to thank all of you for being part of the journey with me. It's been great. Now we continue the journey as disciples who are being sent forth to the far corners of the world.